Today we're going to talk about the concept of developing an on-site stretching program. We've had this request a lot lately, and it's something that continually comes up with several clients who are interested in working on developing a program in-house or modifying their existing program if they already have one. So we're going to talk about some of the principles behind the design of this today and why you would want to take certain steps to make this process as effective as possible at your work site. So before we start with that, just briefly about PROergonomics. We are all certified ergonomists. Myself and my two partners all hold the certified ergonomist designation. We have a lot of experiences in a real variety of industries, so chances are good that we've worked with someone, yourself or otherwise, in your industry and have some background knowledge to bring to the table. We also often help to lower injury costs. Ultimately, that's the goal most often when we're hired. And we increase productivity, which ultimately those two things combined help clients save some valuable dollars, right? You don't want to be spending money on the wrong thing. And we can help you focus your energies into your proactive approaches by helping you determine where is the best place to spend that money and where is the best place to make improvement in order to save some of those associated costs. So we really do have a wide variety of experience, and we can bring a lot to the table and help you develop your program, whatever step of your program you may be at. In order to do that, we offer a whole variety of consulting services. We really are a full-service ergonomics firm, so we provide office assessments, obviously a key component of any ergonomics program, also ergonomic risk assessments for non-office environments. We work with folks in the field, we work with folks in manufacturing environments, food processing, nuclear. You can see sort of the wide range of industries that we do get involved in. We also certainly are helping with physical and cognitive demands assessments, which is often referred to as a job demands assessment, sort of a combined physical and cognitive assessment. We help with return to work cases. Any of our clients that are struggling to bring someone back to work, or perhaps you're trying to prove that an injury didn't happen at work, we can help you build that case by providing that sort of professional expert opinion on it. We also do all kinds of different training. Our webinars, like you're seeing today, are only a small portion of what we do. We train joint health and safety committees, one-day trainings, sometimes multi-day trainings, depending on what level of experience you have and where you want to go with your program. And then I've also added in that we do stretching program development. Sometimes our clients are looking for help in how to develop the stretching program, determine which stretches they want to use, and we can help with that too. So my goal for today is to talk briefly about stretching program perceptions. What do people believe stretching programs do for themselves and or their company? And then I want to talk about what they actually do, what the research is really saying. So we're going to talk about stretching in the office as well as stretching programs outside of the office, because there are sort of two different trains there. So we want to touch on both and then talk about the importance of ergonomics in this whole process, because it is a key role in preventing injury. And we're going to highlight some of those things and how you can use it to your advantage. And finally, we're going to spend probably the most time talking about the actual steps of the program. What steps do you want to take in order to make sure that your program is as successful as it can be? So I said first we're going to talk about the perceived benefits of stretching. If I was to ask you this question, or way when I brought up that question on the previous slide, maybe you took a minute to think about this. You probably came up with several of these just off the top of your head. The physical perceived benefits are that it's going to minimize employee discomfort, that it's going to improve muscular performance, therefore productivity and efficiency at the work site. It's going to improve muscular flexibility. Your body is going to move more. That's essentially what stretching programs do. And then it's also going to improve joint mobility and range of motion, sort of similar or connected to flexibility. So those are typically the perceived benefits listed for the physical side. For the psychological or the psychosocial side, most often we see that stretching programs, or people believe stretching programs, increase employee morale and improve safety culture. If your employees believe that you are helping them and that you are, investing money in their well-being and their health, oftentimes that translates to an improved employee satisfaction with their job and with the company. So those are some of the perceived benefits. Now I want to revisit or visit for the first time, I guess, what the research is really saying about this. Does the research agree with the perceived benefits? In some cases, the answers are yes. In some cases, the answers are really mixed. So we're going to highlight both of those. So let's start with the office programs. So if you have ever, perhaps you have one yourself right now, stretching programs in the office were quite popular 10 or 15 years ago. We saw several different organizations putting out some example programs or programs that you could download and use that included or reminded employees to stretch. They took them through a guided stretching program that were specifically related to typical office discomfort. So you can see on the left, I have some pictures from the WorkSafe BC program. That's WorkSafe Sam. And he is basically, that program will pop up on your computer screen and it will remind you to do stretches. And as you can see in the top picture there, it will actually show you what the stretches it wants you to do are. So he has his arms above his head, he's stretching tall, which would be working on, elongating your spine. There's also ones for your shoulder, your wrists, your elbow, your lower back. There's additional stretches for that. So all of those programs or those elements are meant to take employees through a stretching program. But you'll notice that all the stretches in that program are specifically relevant to office discomfort. So they're going to spend a lot more time in that stretching program on upper body injuries than they are on lower body injuries, right? But they will spend a little time on lower body, but it's going to be significantly less because that's not where we see the vast majority of our injuries. Stretching programs sort of have consistently in the office environment been found to decrease discomfort. Employees are more comfortable when they have done a stretching program. It increases productivity, gets your blood flowing, gets you refocused, and people seem to break out of some of those monotonous things that decrease productivity. And it also has been found to increase awareness of general discomfort and office ergonomic setup. So employees were more aware of their discomfort, which makes sense, right? If I ask you to stretch your neck and you've never really thought about it before, but your neck is kind of sore, when you start to do those stretches, you'll probably start to feel that discomfort and you're focused on your neck, right? So it sort of draws out or creates a sort of a pinpoint so that you notice that discomfort when you're doing the stretch, whereas you might not notice it or think about it day to day. This is especially true for employees who have very pronounced discomfort or very severe discomfort in one area. So I saw someone the other day, I asked them about their discomfort. They started talking about their lower back immediately, right? All the challenges they've been having with their lower back. But the reality is they also have discomfort in other areas. So once she finished telling me about her lower back, I specifically asked the question, do you have any other discomfort? Aside from your lower back, are there any other areas that you're experiencing discomfort in? I'm here to do your assessment. Let's look at everything. I want to make sure we address all your issues. And she started thinking for a second. She goes, you know what, I do actually. I have discomfort in my neck and my upper back as well. So it's very common for employees to do that, to fixate on the item that is the greatest issue in their life, right? And then sort of ignore or overlook some of the smaller items as not problematic. But they could also be potential precursor to injury, and you want to focus on all those things. So the stretching programs often highlight or draw out those smaller potential issues and increase awareness on that, which is cool, right? Which is to their advantage. There's been some evidence that suggests that stretching programs really do work in the office environment. So there's a significant reduction in symptoms, about 50% in this study specifically. Positive effect on productivity, just over 60%. So that was obviously a significant positive for this company. Satisfied with program. The employees were happy with the program. They would recommend it to others. So they liked what it was doing. They liked how they were feeling as part of it. And they said the program was really easy to follow because there's visuals on your screen showing you exactly what to do, and they were following along. So that's really positive, right? We're seeing a lot of that happening. One of the challenges or one of the questions that has sort of arisen out of some of these programs is, I guess the question, the validity of the program and whether it's actually evaluating the right thing is, the question is, does the break itself potentially cause these benefits, or is it the stretching program, right? We've heard so much over the last several months / years about how sitting is the new smoking, sitting is killing us, all these catchphrases that are out there. And really, when you're looking at a stretching program like this that guides you through a series of stretches, it gets you moving, gets you out of your chair, gets you away from your computer for a couple minutes every hour, let's say every 45 minutes, depending on how the program is set up. And so is it the break that is creating the benefit, all these reductions in symptoms and positive effect on productivity, or is it the actual stretching? And that's something that we haven't really flushed out yet. Don't really know the answer to that. Certainly the break is to the employee's advantage. And so whether they actually do the stretches to their full ability or not, they may see some significant positive effects just by getting up from their computer. And we already know the health benefits of getting up and moving away from the computer, right? We know that's good for us. So that's been an interesting question about stretching programs in the office. Is it the break or is it the actual stretching that is demonstrating that significant improvement? Okay, so there are two types of stretching programs really that exist. Ultimately they're the same. They just have some different ways that they go about introducing the stretching intervention to the employee. So there are interruption programs that are designed to force the employee to stop work while the program runs. So the program will pop up, tell the employee what stretches to do at what time, but it will actually lock the employee out. So they won't be able to move past or continue on with work until this program is finished running. So let's say it takes 2 minutes to run, it will run its full course for 2 minutes and the employee can't exit out of it or can't go back to work until it's complete. A passive program is essentially the same thing. It provides a guided stretching program, pops up on the screen, reminds employees to stretch throughout the day, but it doesn't actually stop the employee from continuing on with work. So if it pops up at an inconvenient time, you can exit out of it and you can continue working, or you can go back to your meeting or whatever it was that you were doing, and you can continue working without participating in the stretching program. So they both have their pros and cons, right? An interrupting program, imagine a day that you've been really focused on getting something done, or you've been feeling very hectic trying to accomplish something. You're right near the end of that project, and all of a sudden, your phone rings or this program pops up and interrupts you. Right? It can be incredibly frustrating to be in the zone and then have something like this pop up and interrupt you when the flow is going so well. So that can be incredibly frustrating, and the employees have definitely reported that it can be a real challenge for them. But the significant positive for this type of program is the compliance level, that more employees are likely to participate in the stretching program if they basically have to, right? If they can't continue working, they cannot choose to work past it or work through it, they are more likely to participate. And the interesting part here, again, going back to the idea of stretching versus just a break, which is to their advantage, even if they choose not to participate in the stretching program, they don't actually follow the stretches that are being guided through, they are more likely to actually just stand up and take a short break or walk away from their workstation because they can't work, right? They don't have that ability to move past the screen. They get stuck here. They have 2 minutes where it's downtime no matter what. They either stretch or they take a break, both of which are incredibly healthy, right? So the interruption programs are great in terms they lead to compliance, but not necessarily great because it can be quite frustrating. The passive programs, the challenge here is voluntary compliance leads to decreased usage. So if you have the luxury of escaping out, we always, I shouldn't say always, most people feel like they're very busy and they're in the middle of something and they really just don't have the time. And if you have a job like that where you constantly feel pressure to complete things, you're not likely to take the break. And unfortunately, the lack of taking that break, getting away from whatever it is you're doing, is going to increase your discomfort levels potentially because you're not escaping that static posture of computer work. So both programs have their pros and cons, and they've both been used in different ways, and you can decide which one is most appropriate for you. There's some interesting things happening with technology here as well right now. Think about the Apple Watch. If you have one, or perhaps you've read something about it, it will actually remind you periodically that you need to get up and it's time to stand, I think is exactly what it says on the watch. A little message pops up and says it's time to stand, and we'll be seeing some more employees moving regularly throughout their day because they have technology like the Apple Watch or a Fitbit or Nike Fuel Band or whatever it is that they're using that is going to encourage them to be more active. So that alone, the technology may actually be helping us be more active in the office too, which is kind of a cool intervention that is potentially happening, obviously on the employee's own time and own money to wear that or choose to wear that. But it's kind of an interesting twist to this. Probably for me, the biggest drawback of both of these is the idea that neither of them directly address the ergonomic setup issues. So although they guide you through stretches and help you be more comfortable, they don't actually change the setup of your workstation in any way. So no stretching program in the office is addressing the root cause, right? If the employee has back discomfort, I want to make sure that they are getting the appropriate fit from their chair, whether it be in terms of setup adjustments or in terms of a new chair because their current chair is too big for them or doesn't have the right back support or whatever it is. I want them to get the right fit out of their chair so that I'm eliminating the discomfort, eliminating the cause of the discomfort. Whereas stretching programs don't make any effort to eliminate the cause. They're trying to mitigate the symptoms, right? Trying to make you more comfortable, but not solving the problem. So that's ultimately something that I think they need to be paired together, right? Your ergonomic intervention, whether it's internal or external, is fine. That needs to be paired with the stretching intervention, right? If you're going to go through that route, you want to put the two together to get the most effective way to deal with your pain and discomfort and injury numbers, right? Ultimately, that's what we want to deal with. Now, stretching outside the office, so in manufacturing type environments or in field environments, is totally different. And the research out there is actually completely different as well. So studies have shown consistently that stretching programs increase flexibility. No surprise, that's exactly what a stretch is meant to do, right? It's meant to push your joint, your muscle to its limit and ask it to elongate further, right? To stretch further. And over time, if you continually repeat those stretches, that flexibility or range of motion should progressively increase, right, to whatever point your body is capable of doing. So that is consistent. Studies are showing that increased flexibility is pretty much consistent across the board. The other three I have listed here are less consistent. There is some research and studies that have shown significant reduction in frequency of musculoskeletal disorders or ergonomic injuries, if you want to think about them that way, right? So frequency has gone down. Some studies have seen pain and discomfort go down, and some studies have shown that they have seen significant decrease in cost of claims and lost time for folks who stretch versus non-stretchers. So in some of these interventions and research projects, they've actually had two groups, right? A group that doesn't stretch and a group that does, and compared the results of this. There's a couple studies out there that have seen essentially 0 MSDs during the duration of time the program has been in place. So a couple of them are like 2-month-long durations or 3-month-long durations of this research project, and they're reporting 0 MSDs. But we have to remember that that's a very small timeline, right? Not all of us would experience a lot of MSDs during that sort of shortened time frame. And you've just introduced an intervention of a stretching program, so you may see some positive benefits, less reporting because the employees are feeling loved at their work site. The work site cares about how they feel. They sort of get this perceived feeling of being better and healthier because they are stretching. So those timelines may not actually be long enough to truly see the benefits we're looking for. So some studies have shown this, but some studies have also shown this. Some studies have shown that there's a lack of ongoing participation, so that's a challenge. Employees are kind of keen at the beginning, and then it becomes sort of routine, and then they slowly peter off, and it drops and drops and drops participation-wise to the point where there's very little active participation going on. A lot of studies have also shown that there's little to no change in discomfort. So if you're looking at reducing discomfort, if that's your ultimate goal, lots of studies have shown that there's been no change in that area. So that's a drawback. You don't want to implement a stretching program with that being your end goal and then find out that there is no actual change. So that's a challenge. And other studies have found that there was little to no change in injury frequency or severity. So the injuries that did occur were just as severe as they used to be, and the frequency or the numbers of injuries they were having were just as frequent as before as well. So this is really where the challenge with stretching initiatives have come from, is that when you look at the literature that's out there on stretching outside of the office environment, the literature is really a hugely mixed bag. Everything says something different, whether it's a positive or a negative. It's been really mixed. And so it's very hard to quantitatively say, yes, this is going to work for you, and no, it's not. Because obviously some companies we talk to and work with have some fabulous anecdotal evidence that says it is working for them. Their employees love it. They're fully participating. They really enjoy it. And other companies had trouble with compliance, trouble with participation. It was constantly a challenge and a struggle. They didn't see any change in their injury rates, so it wasn't worth it for them, right? And that's That's pretty common. That's basically what the literature is also saying, right? Some companies see great effects, some companies do not. And so that's probably one of the biggest challenges, and just something you need to be aware of as you're choosing to go forward with a stretching program, is that you really need to do a great job of measuring some of these things, both pre and post, right? You need to know what your injury statistics are related to MSDs before the intervention, and then implement your stretching program and do a post intervention, whether it's at the 3 month, 6 month, a year mark. And you really need to be able to compare your injury stats and your discomfort reduction and determine whether this stretching program is working for you, because it may not be. Based on the research out there, it really might not be. So you want to make sure that you're quantitatively measuring those so you can make a decision about whether you want to go forwards with the intervention or not, right? It might not be a good fit for your work site, but you need to have those numbers in place so you can evaluate that. So again, some more words of caution as we think about this. So those are the sort of the research on stretching programs at work sites. But there is some new research coming out of one of the leaders in this field, Stuart McGill, and he's suggesting that there are some perceptions that are out there that may be false about stretching. So for example, one of the ones he really talks about a lot is that it's widely believed that increased range of motion for the back is beneficial. So if I was to ask you, is better range of motion at your back a good thing? Most of you would have said yes. But a lot of the evidence, the actual research evidence, is suggesting that greater range of motion may actually increase your risk of future back problems. So a stretching program designed to stretch out your back muscles, in theory, is increasing your range of motion. And what they're seeing in the research is that there's a point at which this is beneficial, and then when you cross that point to become too flexible, essentially, there seems to be an increase in risk for those back problems. So they see once they get to this point of mobility or range of motion increases, all of a sudden we may actually increase our risk for back problems. So a stretching program may actually be harming us in some ways. It benefits for a short period of time, and then it may actually be increasing our risk, which is not what you want as an employer, right? So we need to be really cognizant of this and doing regular checks on sort of where our numbers are. I just spoke with someone the other day, a company who has been doing or was doing a stretching program, I should say, and they actually stopped their stretching program after some of this research was coming out and found that they had no change in their injury rate, that their injury rate did not go up after they stopped their stretching program. So they very quickly learned that maybe it wasn't doing what they had thought it was, and they just hadn't been doing necessarily a good job of tracking that all the way along. So I think that's an important piece. You really need to be constantly revisiting those numbers and making sure that your stretching program really is working to your advantage and it's not just a perceived benefit. The other catch is that not everybody should participate, right? Folks who have pre-existing injuries, people who have hypermobile joints, right? Some folks can stretch further than others in ways that a normal body and normal joints don't do. And so those individuals may actually be increasing their risk for injury by further increasing the flexibility of those joints. So obviously folks with injuries, there's going to be limitations on what they can do, and you need to figure out how to have them involved. Do they do part of it and not other stretches? Does their doctor dictate which stretches they can do? Will you send in the stretching regimen to the doctor and they basically say, yes, they can do these 10, they can't do these other 4. You need to figure out how that works for you, but the pre-existing or previous injuries plays a bit of a sticky role here. You want to make sure that those individuals are not aggravating an injury by stretching a muscle in a way they shouldn't, right? Stretching may also increase our pain threshold. So somebody who would normally score their pain on as a 7, they implement and start participating in the stretching program. Stretching makes them more flexible, makes those muscles a little more pliable, and all of a sudden they're scoring the same pain as a 4 or 5. Well, that's problematic from an injury perspective because now it's exactly the same discomfort. Nothing's changed potentially, and they're scoring it differently. So if we increase that pain threshold, we may work further into our pain. We now work to our 7, which you would have originally called a 10, and now ultimately we've really pushed our body a lot further than it should have been. We should have seen the warning signs earlier, and we should have, been reporting that as an injury or discomfort and beginning treatment and help for it before this level, right? Before we get to this new level. So those are just some words of caution about things you want to watch out for in a stretching program. So let's talk about what the actual benefits of this are. So just looking at some of the specifics. So when you look at the benefits versus the cost, this sort of highlights the things we've been talking about, right? Benefits are often fairly consistently, improve flexibility, that may or may not be a benefit, improve productivity, improve morale, and improve safety culture. We consistently see that employees who feel like the company is taking care of their well-being and their health feel better about their job. They're more focused on the safety elements. They just see the company in a different way. So there are some definite perceived benefits here, but they're really always the psychosocial ones. Those are the consistent ones we see. The cost obviously is the development of the program, and if you work in an environment where you're talking about like time is money, as is for everyone, you can really easily quantify that. Like if you're going to pull employees off the floor for, let's say, 4 or 5 minutes a day to do a stretching intervention, you can figure out what that lost 5 minutes in production works out to in terms of the dollars and cents, right? What is that decrease in the day? And you need to make that up plus the cost of the program in your injury reduction and or your injury severity, right? The cost of your injuries need to make up that difference. And so this is the one that's the swing, right? The ones I have at the bottom, the injury reduction and the reduced injury severity, those ones can swing both ways, right? The research has demonstrated that. Some companies are seeing significant injury reduction and reduced severity. That makes that a benefit. Other companies are not seeing that, right? They're seeing that very little has changed, or it changes in the very short term, but then nothing progresses after that. That might make that a cost, right? So you need to be, those are the two that really have the opportunity to swing this as a yes, absolutely continue with this program, or no, it's not worth it. We're wasting too much time and losing production, and then we're not seeing that back in the numbers of injuries and the frequency and the severity. The actual injury costs aren't making it up. So we need to really properly evaluate those bottom two things so we know whether this is a significant benefit or a cost and can make an accurate decision about whether we want to go forwards with the program or not. So it really is about tracking these things well and tracking them properly so that you can accurately determine whether there's been a change or not. So talking about stretching program steps, this is usually where we get involved with the clients that we work with on stretching programs, is that they need help developing the program itself. But this really isn't as simple as just running in and dropping in a canned stretching program. It's really shouldn't be that way. It should be something custom. So it needs to start with getting buy-in, right? You want to get buy-in from your top down. You want to get buy-in from your employees for sure, but you need that financial support from your upper management pieces, right? You need them to support the program. Because you're going to have employees who are no longer productive for 5 minutes of a day, right? And the argument might be that it increases productivity in the end because that short break actually gets them, re-energized or whatever. That's fine. But you ultimately need to have upper management be in support. What's even more fabulous if you can get your upper management actually participating in the program. So it would be fabulous if you could see them out on the floor periodically participating in the stretching program. If they're doing a stretching program in the office environment, your employees should walk by sometimes and catch your president or your CEO or your managers and supervisors doing the stretches in their office sort of on their own time, right? Like as part of their regular workday, to really demonstrate that support for the program and the importance of participation. So you want to talk about that. You want to make sure you get that buy-in because that will have a huge impact on your success and your continued participation. I worked with a client who did a pretty extensive, what I would consider to be like the gold standard of stretching program development. They really took this to a fabulous level. They started by gathering injury and discomfort data. So they went back to their injury statistics, pulled out everything that was a sprain and strain, eliminated out of that anything that was from a trip or a fall. So they really got down to what is probably an MSD, likely an MSD, and then focused on what body parts they were, what the cost of the associated injuries were. They really gathered some excellent data, but they didn't stop there. They took it one step further and gathered discomfort data, which was also excellent. So they asked their employees for feedback on where they were uncomfortable. I'll show you on my next slide here. I have a discomfort survey, and they used that to their advantage. They said, okay, you don't have an injury yet, but that doesn't mean you don't have discomfort. We want to know about your discomfort because really discomfort is just a precursor to an injury, right? Your body is telling you something's wrong, and if you don't make a change, you're likely to experience an injury. So they gathered discomfort data as well. So now they've got all this excellent material. They know exactly what their employees' discomfort level was at different body parts. So it told us very quickly that the shoulder was a major risk factor for them, and particularly the right shoulder or the dominant shoulder, which not right or left, it was dominant hand shoulder, dominant hand elbow, dominant hand wrist, also the non-dominant wrist and the non-dominant elbow. So it gave us some very specific data about where we wanted to focus our stretches. We also used data. They also had us do an ergonomic assessment of the work area and a physical demands assessment. So they wanted to know what the physical demands were of the job. They wanted to properly document it and then use that information as well. So in theory, they should line up, right? The physical demands of the job probably highlighted that the shoulder was a high risk activity. The wrist was used incredibly regularly, maybe with force. The elbow was very active. It looked at the upper limb. That connected back to the injury data, discomfort data, really supported that this is an area we want to focus on. Then they took all of that fabulous information and went down to this customize your stretching sequence. So instead of just handing a canned presentation over, we developed a stretching program that was exactly designed to match the issues they were experiencing. So when we looked at it, these employees spent a significant amount of time bending forwards to work on a large part. And so when they were working on that part, they were bent forwards pretty much continuously. They were reaching forwards. They had a tool that was vibrating sometimes when they were working on it. So they had all these things. I don't want someone who spends a significant chunk of their day bending forwards. I don't want that employee to stretch by doing forward bends, because they're already stretching those muscles for long periods of time throughout the day in the forward direction. I want to help contract those muscles and extend the other opposing muscles, and I want them to do back extensions and other back stretches that are going to counteract those. So we really want to customize our stretching sequence to address the issues identified above and to counteract all the postures and movements that these employees are doing in the day. You want to do counter stretches, right? You want to do stretches in the opposite direction. So that's really where you want to focus your time and energy, is figuring out how you want to customize that sequence. Is not a one size fits all. This company even went so far to do different stretching programs and different work groups. So this work group did this, worked on this specific part, manufacturing, assembly, everything for this part. They spent a lot of time bending forwards. The parts were large. It was awkward. But another work environment didn't spend very much time bending forwards. They worked on small parts that were at a better height. They were able to stand upright, but they were looking down a lot. So they focused a lot of their stretches on the neck and the shoulders and the hands and wrists for the assembly piece. And so they really focused on that area as that in that work group, because they didn't need to focus on the back stretches to the same degree, right? So they really customized the stretches for each individual work group. And you want to start obviously with a warm up and a cool down. I think that one's fairly straightforward. It's pretty well known at this point. Your muscles don't stretch very well if you're cold. So you want to do some kind of warm up, get those muscles moving a little bit before you start the actual stretching intervention. So a short warm up, do your stretching intervention, and then a short cool down to get those muscles back to a more normal temperature before you send people back out to their job, right? It are important pieces of the puzzle. Really, you're going to spend a lot of time marketing and selling this program, right? It is something that you're asking all your employees to participate in. It's something that they may be reluctant to join in on. So you may really want to focus some energy on the marketing piece. And some of that comes from selecting and training your champions, right? You want someone in that work group or a manager or a supervisor to be the one leading the stretches, leading the program. So you may want those folks on your team as you develop this and work through the program, getting their feedback and their involvement, but you also probably want them demonstrating the stretches. You don't want me as a consultant being the face of your stretching program. You don't want me pictured on a poster showing you how to do all the stretches. You want your employees on that poster showing other employees how to do the stretches. You don't want me doing a video showing you how to work through the stretches that you play every day to guide them through the stretching intervention. You want some of your employees on that video doing the stretches, guiding your other employees through the intervention. So you want to train your champions, help them help their employees or their colleagues and peers be successful with the stretching intervention. You'll find you get a lot more buy-in and support internally that way. So ergonomics does have a role to play here, and I just wanted to highlight this because I think I touched on it in terms of the office stretching programs. I want to touch on it in terms of the non-office stretching programs. When you look at a stretching program, it is an administrative control, right? It is still, and we know administrative control is a weaker control option. We want to work through engineering and elimination controls before we get to a stretching program. So it is that administrative control. It can be an effective tool, but it shouldn't be the sole way that you address your high-risk jobs, right? If that's your goal, if your goal is to say, okay, I have some high-risk positions here, I know that they're high risk, what I want to do is implement a stretching program. That's not probably the best way to approach this, right? What you want to do is pair the stretching program with another intervention of some kind. So you want to pair the stretching program with an ergonomic intervention, right? You want to implement some tools and make some changes to the workstation, the layout, the process in some way to improve that job from like an engineering perspective, of physical changes to the job before we implement the stretching initiative, right? They work together as a unit, but they can only be as effective, like the stretching program can only be as effective as you are at addressing the root cause. If you stretch someone and send them back to a job that has several high-risk hazards, chances are good that they still will could easily get injured, right? We want to make sure we're addressing those root causes and then implementing the stretching program in conjunction with that, right? You need to address the root cause. Stretching a program only addresses the symptoms, right? So just keep that in mind. I also highlighted this a little bit, right? The ergonomics can help you develop a physical demands assessment, which you use all of that information to determine the potential injury risk in the job, right? Or the ergonomic assessment develops the injury risk level, but the physical demands assessment documents the frequency and the duration of the postures, which you will use to your advantage. That little example on the bottom right there is the discomfort survey, and you can see how there's a whole bunch of different body parts, and they score it on a score of 1 to 10 or 0 to 10 to determine what level of injury or what level of discomfort they have at those body sites. And that can be super valuable information because you can use it pre and post. You can do it before the stretching intervention. You can do it again 6 months later, see whether the discomfort has been reduced as well as your injury numbers have been reduced, as well as, the severity has been reduced. And you can look at several different indicators there, which is kind of nice. So that's really what I want to talk about in terms of the stretching programs today. There is, like I said, there's a huge variety of research and things out there in support and non-support of this. So you need to make a decision internally about whether you want to go forwards with it. But if you do, we can help you. If you're struggling with figuring out what the steps are, how to put the program together, it's something that we can definitely help you with. You can always contact us at the information that I've got there. That's my direct line and my email, and then our website. And you can always email us through the website as well to the general account, and myself or Alex or Sarah will get back to you. So I hope you've learned a little bit about stretching programs today. If you have any questions, please email us. We would love to hear from you. I've also listed some references here for you, just some of the research that I was reading before presenting the material. So if you'd like to read any of that or go back to some of those references, you can have access to them. Just pause the video here and you should be able to look those materials up. There are lots more than this as well. This is just some of the information I was pulling from this week. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. And again, if you have any questions, please contact us through our website or directly to me, and I'd be happy to help you with your stretching program.